Well, it's time for the IS audit process part 2. In this Nugget movie, we're going to continue where we left off in part 1 as we look at additional methodologies and techniques to the IS audit process. In this CBT Nugget, we're going to look at 6 main topics. First of all, we'll explore audit classifications. Then, we'll look at the several phases of the audit process. We'll look at a risk-based audit approach, and then we'll break down some concepts like evidence, computer-assisted audit techniques, and finally, control self-assessment. As an IS auditor, you should realize that there's various types of audits that you can perform. These can be done internally, they can be done externally, and each one of these has their own specific procedures. For example, financial audits. This, of course, is to assess the correctness of your organization's financial statements. This audit relates to financial information integrity and reliability, accountability to a wide range of entities. Operational audits are designed to evaluate your organization's internal control structure in a particular area of the organization, department, or on a process-by-process basis. A couple of examples of operational audits would be auditing the application controls, or your logical security systems, or access control mechanisms. An integrated audit is really a combination of a financial audit and an operational audit. Since an organization is going to the trouble to actually implement auditing, it's often cost feasible to integrate different audits together at one time to assess the overall objectives in your organization concerning financial information, safeguarding your assets, compliance, overall efficiency. An integrated audit can be done by external auditors, third party, or it can be done by an internal auditing team. Administrative audits are basically related to kind of the organizational structure and control of your organization, related to the overall efficiency and productivity of the management of your domain. An IS audit, or information systems audit, is going to collect and evaluate evidence to decide whether the information systems and related mechanisms are going to adequately safeguard your assets. Are they going to maintain your data and system integrity? Are they going to give you relevant and reliable data? Will you be able to achieve your organizational and business goals adequately? Are you efficiently consuming resources? And have you put into place internal controls that give you reasonable assurance that your business, control, and operational objectives are going to be met? You may also have specialized audits, ones that are done for certain standards, certain guidelines. For an example, the Statement on Auditing Standards, SAS 70. There's a number of specialized reviews that examine certain areas done by third parties and forensic auditing. Forensic auditing is our last classification, and that's basically an audit specializing in discovering, disclosing, and following up on fraud and crime. Now, although there are no exact official phases to the audit process that are, documented for the industry, you need to have a set of procedures in place that you're going to use to achieve your planned audit objectives. So let's look at a typical kind of phases of a typical audit. First of all, looking at the audit subject, or we're going to audit the subject and define what that subject is. This is the area, this is the department, this is the entity that you're going to be auditing. Once you've determined the subject of the audit, then you want to determine what your audit objectives are, the purpose of the audit. For example, are you going to be auditing source code for a custom application? Are you going to be auditing the firewall services? Are you going to be auditing a security policy? Are you going to be auditing accounting? Is accounting your objectives, research and development. So what are the objectives of your audit? And kind of tied into the objectives, you want to know what is the scope. Again, the scope is the particular entity, the systems, the unit that you're going to audit, the function that you're going to audit. Again, this may be application changes, this may be configuration changes, this may be your intrusion detection, intrusion prevention services. Perhaps it's a application, let's say Cisco Mars, that you're using to audit and monitor your entire enterprise organization. So what is the scope of the audit? And typically involved with scope is how much time are you going to take for this audit process. So this really kind of ties into what we'd say project management. And then, of course, you're going to want to do some pre-audit planning, and really these three items here are all part of your pre-audit planning. Determining the subject, the objective, and the scope of your audit is all part of the pre-audit planning process. Identifying the skills that you'll need for this audit, the human resources that you'll need, what sources of information and testing capabilities will you need. Is this going to be done in a hard copy fashion? Is it going to be done on printed materials? Is it going to be done within an application and shared? Flow charts, standards, policies and procedures, any previous auditing materials that have been used, you're going to bring those into the planning process. And then, of course, kind of under scope is what are the locations, what are the facilities that you're going to audit. This is all part of pre-audit planning. And then along with that, and again, I had these broken down into different phases, but you can see how there's so much overlap here. For example, data gathering. I just mentioned, a lot of data gathering under the pre-audit planning process, but data gathering is putting together a list of individuals that you're going to interview. People who have to sign off, people in management, the CIO. Gathering up the departmental policies and procedures, the standards, the guidelines. Also putting together in this process all of the auditing tools that you're going to use and a written methodology that you're going to use to test the audit and to verify. And again, you've got procedures for evaluating the results. This is going to be on an organization-by-organization basis, on a company-by-company basis. Same thing with management communication. These are just phases. You can't really lay out any subtopics here because this really depends upon the company, the organization you're dealing with. But then finally, you're going to have, methods put in place to prepare the report. Follow-up procedures, evaluation procedures, testing efficiency and effectiveness of the audit, identifying the procedures for test control, and then just, an overall assessment of the completeness of the documents and the policies and the procedures, methods to generate reports of this audit. I kind of briefly mentioned Cisco Mars, and I don't want to really fly over that. Mars is the Cisco Security Monitoring, Analysis, and Response System, and it's really part of Cisco's Security Management Suite and its enforcement of the Cisco Self-Defending Network. It's an integrated solution that simplifies, it automates the tasks associated with security management operations, configurations, monitoring, auditing, analysis, and response on an enterprise basis. And you can see this is just one of the areas of Mars where you can go in and you can create queries and generate reports. This is one half of the screen where you see your query type right here. Let me show you the other half of the screen. You've got your tabs up here to summarize, to look at security incidents, queries, reports, rules, management, admin. And this is just one of those tools, those enterprise tools that could be used by the auditor to complete a comprehensive audit of a enterprise security policy. So under the data gathering phase of our audit phases, where you develop audit tools and methodology to test and verify control, this Cisco Mars, the monitoring, analysis, and response system, may be one of those powerful tools that you would use in an enterprise organization. Now, when we looked at those different phases, one thing that we left out was the fact that there's going to be errors. There are going to be omissions. There are going to be gaps. There's going to be flaws. There's going to be what we call audit risk, okay? This is the risk that the information or the ultimate reporting, whether it be financial or IS or IT, is going to contain material that's going to be in error, okay? Or information that just simply goes undetected during the course of the audit. And that's just, human beings are involved. It's not a perfect process. Let's categorize what we call audit risk here. Inherent risk is the obvious risk that exists during an audit. It's also combined with other errors that are encountered during the audit process. It's also referred to the fact that you're susceptible to material misstatement, the absence of related controls during the audit process, misstating complex calculations, or overestimating and underestimating the value of assets. These are risks that are just basically part of the nature of business. A control risk is the risk that a material error is there that can't be prevented or detected in a timely manner by your internal control systems. For example, just too much logged information to be able to audit properly. Maybe logs have been deleted, things that have been missed in the logs by human intervention. Detection risk is another audit risk. The IS auditor is going to use an inadequate process, inadequate test procedures, maybe using the wrong processes during the risk assessment phase of an audit. This also can allude to basic inadequacies of the auditor himself or herself. And then overall audit risk is the combination of all these individual categories of audit risks that can be a stumbling block to reaching control objectives. So in a nutshell, audit risk can be referred to as the level of risk that we as IS auditors are prepared to accept during the process of conducting an audit. And so keeping that in mind, we can take kind of a risk-based audit approach, knowing that there is a certain degree of acceptable error, but we're going to step by step go through and first of all gather data and plan for our audit, getting as much knowledge of the business, as much knowledge of the industry as possible, understanding the regulatory and the governmental statutes, the governmental compliance issues, knowing the inherent risk assessment capabilities, looking at the results from prior audits, and looking at recent financial and technical information. Then we evaluate whatever internal controls we're going to put in place. This is the control environment, control procedures, detecting risk assessment, controlling risk assessment, and just getting an overall evaluation of total risk. Then we'll perform our compliance testing. These are going to identify the key controls that we're going to use, and to test those controls, we'll perform tests to make sure those controls are reliable and that we're adhering to organizational policies and procedures. We'll then conduct substantive testing, analytical procedures, audit process, and then finally we'll perform the audit. That's creating the recommendations and then writing the audit report. In this part 2 nugget of the IS audit process, we want to look at another major concept which is part of auditing, and that is the concept of evidence. Evidence is a pretty generic term, but it goes back to the concept of gathering information, gathering data, and really that kind of begins all of the processes when an auditor is doing their job. Now, evidence is really any information, any data that's used by the information system auditor to decide whether the entity that they're looking at or the data itself that's being audited is using the right criteria or is following the right processes or is using the correct objectives. The conclusions that you come to as an auditor has to be based on relevant, competent, and adequate evidence and proper evidence gathering techniques. Now, what makes up evidence? Okay, well, it can be simply observation, visual observation. It can be notes that you have from interviewing key players, interviewing decision makers, interviewing power users, end users, interviewing security engineers, network engineers, database engineers, interviewing the management. It's the result of any tests that are run. It's the result of any establishment of baselines for performance, for security, tests that are done for observation of techniques for optimization of the processes. It can be pretty much any material from internal documentation or a third-party auditor or correspondence that gives us valid data. Now, we have to ask some questions, of course. Yes, we're observing. Yes, we're taking notes. Yes, we're doing tests. Yes, we're doing interviews. We're looking at documentation, all of these things. But we have to ask some questions. Is this evidence reliable? Because if the process breaks down here in this evidence gathering process, then it can affect the entire audit. How independent is the evidence provider? Is it somebody who's internal? How independent are they? Is it a third-party hired gun? How independent are they? How qualified is the evidence gatherer? Do they have a CISA or CISM certification or some other type of certification, maybe CISSP? If you're looking at Cisco equipment for security, for example, are they qualified in that area? If you're looking at financial auditing or security policy auditing, what type of certifications and experience do they have? Also, how objective is the evidence? What are the goals here? Are the goals for objective fact-finding, or is subjectivity been injected into the process? You want to know that. And of course, what's the timing of the evidence? How old is the material? What are your deadlines? What are your goals? What are your windows for opportunity to do these audits? Those types of things. Now, I alluded to some of these techniques for gathering evidence, for gathering data. Let me just give you kind of an official list here. You can observe the IS organization and administration. You can review the information system policies and procedures and standards, the written documentation. You can interview personnel and observe personnel to gather evidence. You can observe different processes, different techniques, different procedures over a certain period of time. You can do sampling. From a technical standpoint, sampling is going to be used when you have time restraints and cost restraints, considerations that preclude having a long period of time to verify all the transactions, to verify all your events and all your objectives. So basically, you take a population or a segment of the entire group and you do sampling or testing. There's really two types of sampling: statistical sampling and what we call judgmental sampling or non-statistical sampling. Statistical sampling is going to be using the mathematical laws of probability to calculate a sampling size, choose the sample items, evaluate the sample results, and then from that information you make an inference, okay, or a educated guess. Judgmental sampling basically uses the judgment of the auditor to determine how you're going to get this information, how you're going to sample, the number of items that you're going to look at from the population, again, this segment of the overall population. So it's not so mathematical. You're relying on the subjective judgment of the auditor, and to determine which are the most risky areas, which are the key areas to audit, what is the most reliable evidence. Also, to gather evidence, you can utilize other auditors and experts in their field. So using other individuals, bringing in a team of people, bringing in consultants. You may be a consultant. You may be a third-party auditor. You can use some of your peers in the auditing community to help you gather evidence. And then finally, we want to look at computer-assisted audit techniques. And this is just cutting-edge, bleeding-edge technology to help us not only gather evidence, but conduct our audit. And I'm going to give you an example here of doing a security audit, okay, on a Cisco perimeter router, and we're going to use a CAAT, a computer-assisted audit technique. Computer-assisted audit techniques are an important tool for the IS auditor in gathering information, in evidence gathering, in deriving information from our hardware systems, our software environment, recording formats, processing functions. You can use these computer, or we'll call them CATs, in a wide variety of areas. As you can see here, we can test the details of transactions and financial balances. We can use these CATs to do analytical review. We can use CATs for vulnerability assessment in a security environment, penetration testing, vulnerability assessment. So let's go take a look at a tool from Cisco that I can use and run a program that will do a security audit on a device. Very interesting. Let's take a look. Okay, what we're looking at here is the Cisco Router and Security Device Manager, the SDM, and I'm from my laptop here, my management station, which could be considered my management console and auditing station. I can run a variety of tools, CAAT techniques, to audit my environment. We're focusing on security right here, and I'm looking here at a 3640 router. This is a kind of a higher end Cisco router that runs at the perimeter of my network. It's modular, so it has all kind of capabilities. It has capabilities for virtual private networking, for routing, for tunneling. It does intrusion prevention systems. It does firewall services. It does a wide variety of services. It's modular. And I can see information about this, but what I want to look at this tool is as a security auditing tool and show you how this is just one of many CATs out there. If I go to the configure area, I can look down here and I can see what's called security audit. So I want to go and configure on this SDM and run a security audit. Now I have two options with this tool. I can say, you know what, I don't even really want to do an audit, I want to just do a one-step lockdown. I want to use a predefined policy and lock down this particular device according to accepted ISO standards, security standards out there. Or I can say, you know what, let's go ahead and perform a security audit. And this is just a prime example of using a computer-assisted audit technique. And I'm going to go in here and it gives me this little wizard to run, and we'll click on next. And what I need to tell it is this: on this particular device, which is the perimeter of my network, I'm going to say this interface, this network interface right here, Ethernet 0, is going to the inside of my corporate network. This serial interface is going to the outside. This connects to the internet. And then I have this other interface here. This may be inside. This may be part of what we call a demilitarized zone or a security zone. A DMZ that maybe has web servers or FTP servers or other application servers, mail servers, for example. But I'm going to go ahead and just look at these two interfaces and run this computer-assisted audit on these two interfaces themselves. I'll click on next, and what it's going to do is it's going to run and it's going to show me recommended security settings. And so in this audit, it's showing me with the X the areas that have not passed. These are not adhering to the recommended security standards. And these really are involving a lot of vulnerabilities of services that are running on this routing device that allow people to take advantage of this machine, to do denial of service attacks, to overwhelm memory, overwhelm buffers, to overwhelm processing. So this really has to do with my TCP/IP functionality on this router. You can see I've gone through here and done a security audit, and I realized that I just haven't passed a lot of areas. And I can save the report if I want to a particular area, and it'll save it under this particular report card format. But if I close this down, what it now gives me the ability to do with this security auditing tool is to go in and it's identified these security problems. I can now go problem by problem and say, you know what, I want to fix it. For example, a very common thing to do is to create a banner so that when somebody accesses a device, whether it be a server, whether it be a routing device, some type of network-enabled device, when they access that device either using a telnet session, a remote access session, or maybe through some type of management console, I want them to see a banner on their screen which tells them, hey, you have to be authorized to use this device. And so I can say, you know, I want to set a banner, and I can just click on Fix It. And it will automatically, with this computer-assisted auditing tool, go in and change the code on this device to fix the problem. If I'm not really quite sure what something is, like, you know, password encryption service is disabled, I can click on this, and it's going to take me and going to give me a little help feature and allow me to go and fix that and show me what command's actually being run. Or I could just say, you know what, fix everything. Click on this, it checks it all, fix all my problems, and click on next. Now the way this SDM works is when I click on next, it actually creates a configuration file that's going to fix all these problems in this security audit. However, I have to actually apply that configuration file to the device. So I actually have to kind of download the configuration file to the device and then save it in the memory of that device before it actually takes effect. I'm just going to cancel out of here, but I just wanted to show you under this particular Nugget movie just an example, and this computer assisted auditing is something that you're seeing more and more in a web-based format in a wide variety of tools. As a matter of fact, this security audit, Cisco just recently added this capability to their graphical utilities, really to kind of keep up with all the other vendors out there and all the other tools that are available. And these cats, you know, I can go to monitor here as well, and I can go down and create some reports if I want to and look at my logging. As a matter of fact, logging is another major aspect of auditing, is looking at logs. And I've got my syslog here. I've got firewall logs. SDEE is another logging protocol that's used besides syslog, and application security logs. So this is another key aspect of of CATs. And when we're looking at the development of these computer-assisted auditing techniques, we're looking at online reporting to show high-risk areas to review, programs and applications that have vulnerabilities, flow charts, reports, looking at our file structures. Again, I've got these same tools, similar types of tools that I can use in a Windows environment. Windows has its own kind of vulnerability assessment tool that I can run if I want to. I'm going to pop off into a little sidebar here. As I mentioned, Microsoft does have its own security auditing tool. Here's Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer 2.01. And you can see that this tool will allow you to go through and you check your Microsoft Windows machine, Windows Server 2003, Windows XP, Windows 2000 for common security configurations. So this is a tool similar to that security audit that I ran on that Cisco router. This, of course, would be a tool that you would run on XP workstations, XP laptops, as well as servers, Windows 2000, 2003. And I can just go through here and just scan my computer by going through, and you can see that the computer name's Nugget Lab Michael and other information. I'm not going to start the scan right now, but I just want to show you that you can go up to Microsoft's website and you can download this Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer and run security audit. And again, this is computer assisted CAAT solution, another security auditing solution for the end user workstation. And again, you want to weigh the pros and cons of using these tools. Again, they are easier to use, and your existing and future staff can take advantage of these, but you need to train people in these tools. If you have to do your own coding, your own programming of these tools to customize them, you need to have that expertise as well. You need to keep in mind installation requirements. For example, to run this tool on this management station, I have to enable Java and JavaScript, and in some security policies I can't do that. Some other tools might need to use SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. Well, it may be that your security policy doesn't allow you to use SNMP or certain versions of SNMP only. So you have to keep those things in mind. Do these tools themselves adhere to your security policy, to your application policy? Anyway, that's the Cisco Router and Security Device Manager and a CAAT, Computer Assisted Auditing Technique. Before we move on to the next topic, I just want to show you another very popular solution that's computer-based auditing. And this is part of Microsoft's Business Solutions Great Plains software. Great Plains software is another very powerful auditing tool. This isn't a security auditing tool, but as you can see here in this tool in Great Plains, we can audit financials, sales, purchasing, inventory, manufacturing, HR, payroll. So we can use this for other aspects of corporate auditing. Great Plains software, another very popular CAAT. The last concept we're going to look at in this Nugget movie is what we call control self-assessment, or CSA. CSA is a process that makes sure that our internal controls, the controls that we're deciding upon, are going to be reliable and acceptable for all the concerned parties. This means managers, this means stakeholders, board of directors, auditing teams, customers, strategic partners, anybody that has their hands on the reliability of our internal control systems. The goal of CSA is to review the key business objectives, to review the risk and the controls that are implemented to manage those risks. And again, this process of control self-assessment needs to be done all along the way to make sure that our auditing strategy is right on the mark. Okay, so by definition, a CSA is a formal, documented, collaborative process. This is going to be coming from an ongoing process of surveys to stakeholders, surveys to auditors, surveys to team members, surveys, questionnaires, and ongoing workshops that allow us to keep up with new techniques, new training, possibly new CAATs to help us in the auditing process. From a security standpoint, it would be workshops to update us with new vulnerabilities, new threats to our environment. For example, if we're going to implement a wireless security policy, what are the threats and vulnerabilities from a wireless environment? Benefits to control self-assessment are early risk detection. before the problem rears its ugly head. Enhancing the internal controls, getting the best controls possible. Cohesion, okay? Employee cohesion, buy-in from management, awareness through training, better communication through self-assessment. Improving the auditing process is the long-term goal. And, of course, the people who have the bottom line, the ones who are spending all the money on this, the ones that have the most to lose, we want to assure them that we have the best processes in place, the best auditing procedures in place to give them the best results. So control, self-assessment, a major aspect of audit planning and audit deployment. In Information Systems Audit Process Part 2, we looked at several knowledge areas. First of all, we broke down audit classifications. We looked at the phases of the audit process. We talked about a risk-based audit approach. We explored the concept of evidence and data gathering. We looked at computer-assisted audit techniques. And then finally, we defined control self-assessment. I hope this CBT Nugget's been informative for you. I want to thank you for viewing. We'll see you in the next movie.